which will have been committed by different persons involved. The report took into account a number of incidents where some procedural actions were overlooked. There were instances of clear breaches of discipline, violation of legal requirement, and total neglect by officers who were either present or responsible for situations that required prompt, responsive actions. The focus is to avoid veering into areas that might confuse procedural breaches with the main mandate, which is to investigate, identify, and prosecute persons responsible for death during the two general elections in the years of the 2020 and 2024. There were also instances of persons being rushed to the court on frivolous and vexatious charges when the same incident had resulted in the death of person or two. Great effort was expended to distill these charges and identify persons against whom evidence could be produced for the deaths recorded during these elections, with evidence to sustain criminal charges being preferred against them. Through careful review of police dockets, on-site inspections, and stakeholders' interview, the Special Investigative Task Force identified 12 specific cases. I must be quick to add that I have since directed that the report of the Commission on the Election Violence at Ayawaso, West Wuogon, be implemented fully for justice to prevail. 6 each from the 2020 and the 2024 general election, which collectively led to 15 deaths as mentioned earlier and injured 40 others. These incidents span multiple regions, including Bono East, Greater Accra region, Bono region, Northern region, Central region, Savannah, and Asante region. The circumstances of each case vary, but nearly all involve the use of firearms during confrontation between supporters as means of crowd control. Investigation into one of the cases during the 2020 general election at Ododo was completed. The Attorney General is currently prosecuting 3 persons who are standing trials at the High Court Criminal Division, Accra. The investigation is by armed police patrol teams. Military personnel were also found to be responsible for 3 of the cases resulting in the death of 3 persons when they intervened to restore calm to chaotic crowds. Investigation further established that 4 of the cases, which resulted in 5 deaths, were recorded when party enthusiastic supporters resorted to the use of firearms against their opponent. The 2 other cases involve persons who were lynched during confrontation between supporters of the 2 major parties. It is worth noting that 21 suspects have been identified through witness interview, scene visit, reconstruction of crime and crime scene, and forensic and ballistic examination of material of evidence relevant to the cases. 11 new dockets have been built on the cases. 4 of the identified suspects have been arrested and admitted to police inquiry bills to facilitate further investigation and to trace their accomplices. 5 other identified suspects have been remanded in prison custody. Warrants of arrest have been procured to facilitate the arrest of some of the identified suspects who are on the run. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, the 2020 investigation reports are constituency in Techima. The observation of the task force are as follows: that the injury could have been avoided had the security personnel not resorted to the use of live ammunition for crowd control. The use of firearms by security personnel was not done under the command of a senior officer who could have ensured that appropriate rules of engagement were observed. Security personnel, especially the police patrol, they directed fire at the escaping crowd. Spent shells could not be retrieved from the scene, as in the case of the Techiman. Immediately the day after the election, it rained heavily, and so they couldn't pick much from the scene, and no bullets or projectiles were retrieved from the bodies of the deceased to assist ballistic examination to identify which weapon caused the injuries or death. it made it difficult to bring finality as to who actually caused the injury and death for now. However, investigation will continue until justice is done. The recommendation from the task force was that the crowd control response of security personnel by resorting to the firing of live arms and also directing fire at the escaping crowd is not acceptable. The victims of the gunshots have suffered injuries that cause them pain, loss of resources for treatment, as well as income. Families have also lost breadwinners. The state should take steps to the state should take up the responsibility to compensate the families who lost their breadwinners situation. Appropriate crowd control gear should be provided to security services. Party executives, officials, and persons involved in election management should be well educated on the provision of the Anti-Vigilante Act 2019 Act 999. Action taken so far on the achievement. The report has been forwarded to the Attorney General for the compensation to be given to the families of the deceased and the injured. Dockets of the case is also referred to the cold case unit of the CID police for the find the actual perpetrators. Odio constituency in the Greater Accra region. The observation of the special task force, is that investigations into the incident failed to be seen by police, as those who fired shots into the crowd and injuring them were charged with the offenses of Conspiracy Act 29 and attempted murder contrary to Section 48 of the same Act. They have been committed and are standing to the families of the deceased. The injured must abide by the judgment of the court in the trial, after which compensation, if any, may be for the workout of compensation to the deceased family. The docket is also at the cold case units, since we've not been able to actually get those who fired the shot that killed the two citizens. Ablekuma Central, that's Odoko Police Church. The observation of the task force is that investigation revealed that the soldiers were interviewed and showed video of a man dressed in military uniform and reported to be the person who fired, resulting in the death of Abbas Ibrahim. But they maintain that the said soldier was not known to them. The case involved accused Collins Kweku, alias Kola, who was charged with causing harm and use of offensive weapon, is still pending before the Circuit Court for Accra. The use of armed military personnel for crowd control duties accounted for the incident that led to the death of one person and injured 4 others. Police personnel were present at the center and should have controlled the crowd, related to the use of live ammunition to attempt to control the crowd. The incident was avoidable because the agitation and shouting by the party supporters were outside the collation center. The action of Collins Kweku was a criminal offense. The recommendation of the task force is that election security management should be coordinated properly to determine when force is required for crowd control. The use of military in crowd control activity should cease if death resulting from high-handedness of state security are to be avoided. Police and sister security agencies should design, ahead of election, a well-coordinated plan on election security management. There should be controlled use of military. There should be controlled use of live ammunition from lethal weapons as a means of scaring or driving crowd from particular location. Capacity building is recommended for police and all arm-bearing security agencies whenever required for election security or crowd control duties. Compensation should be paid to the injured and to the family of the late Ibrahim Abbas. The action that we have taken since the report came is to forward that to the Attorney General for compensation of both the deceased family and those who got injured. The docket is also forwarded to the cold case unit of the CID, since that soldier or the one in the uniform has still not been identified. The Banda Ahikro, that's in the Bono region. Taking into consideration the advice from the Attorney General's office, the task force recommend the following. The investigation continues even though the township are not willing to give information out because of the rivalry between the two towns of Banda Ahikru and Banda Bankazi, but the docket should be forwarded to the cold case unit. The monetary compensation should be paid to the family of the late Silas Wolankami. Report forwarded to the AG for compensation to the deceased family. Doma West Constituency, that's in Kramkwanta. This was also violence test of both NDC and MPP who converged at the voter registration center near the district assembly premises on August 8, 2020 were engaged in riot. They were, however, not attacking the police or security personnel at the center. The use of live ammunition to disperse the riotous crowd by the police was inappropriate and does not conform to any laid-down crowd control method. No police officer or security detail at the registration center was under attack for his or her life to be in immediate danger. Be compensated. Victims Ilyasu Gabriel and Kwame Gatan should also be compensated based on the extent of injury. Savulgu constituency in the Savulgu Teras northern region. The observation of the task force is that there was no confrontation between MPP and NDC supporters before the shot was fired into the crowd. However, NDC supporters were jubilating and firing gunshots and throwing firecrackers. Again, it was established without doubt that the bullet that killed the deceased, Samira Zakaria, was a shot from a high-velocity rifle. The same bullet also caused injuries to other 3 persons. There are 2 possibilities. The first is that the shot must have been fired into the crowd by one of the persons who were jubilating deliberately or accidentally. And the second alternative is that someone with the intention to kill or injure the jubilants infiltrated into the jubilation crowd and fired the fatal shot. The task force recommend that the family of the deceased be compensated for their loss. The 3 other injured persons should also be compensated based on their medical report and for pain and loss suffered as a result of the injuries. And here again, because as they couldn't establish exactly who fired the shot, the docket is also returned to the cold case unit of the Ghana Police Service for further or for future investigation or further investigation. So 2024 election violent cases, starting with Ewutu Senya East Constituency, that's Kaswa. The task force observed that the Honorable Phyllis Koyo Okeno denied that her convoy was attacked. She was nowhere near the scene of the incident. Persons who were involved in the incident have avoided speaking with the task force, while Muhammad Ali and others who were in the Mahindra pickup truck and fired shots from their vehicle have also avoided speaking with the task force. So their opinion have not been established. Muhammad Ali is said to have been flown abroad for further treatment. The late Yusuf Larry Idris died from a gunshot, and those who were in the Mahindra pickup with him knew what happened. The driver of the Mahindra has been traced and further investigation is ongoing. The task force will continue with the investigation. Tolong constituency, that's Yankpala. The observation of the task force is that there is the presence of sophisticated weapons in the Tolong and Yankpala communities, and the level of sophistication is a matter of vote buying on the said election day, that's 2024. The allegation of vote buying was not reported to the EC officials or the security agencies. Security response to the violence was very swift and decisive. Suspect Alhaji Yakubu Abdul Latif Kopshi and Sankara led a team of armed men to Yankpala and engaged in indiscriminate firing of guns, during which the late Sharif Haruna was killed and 5 others were injured. The task force recommends that suspects Alhaji Yakubu and prosecuted. They have all fled the community. The family of the late Sharif Haruna and those who suffered injuries should be compensated by the state. The National Small Arms Commission, other state authorities and traditional leaders should sensitize the members of the two communities of Tolong and Yankwala on the dangers associated with the kind of weapons being held by individuals and the right channel to follow when offended by others. Since the investigation did not produce any evidence against the 6 persons arrested by police during the stop and search exercise conducted immediately after the incident, they should be discharged while efforts are directed at arresting those who actually engage in the firing. The regional police commander should engage the district officer, the PID director, and officers in the region to assist in the arrest of the suspect, Alhaji Yakubu Abdul Latif Kopshi, and his gang in order to hasten prosecution. The report has been forwarded to the AG for the compensation. The supporters were unruly, riotous, and caused damage to property and threatened life. When the rampaging crowd saw the police firing warning shot and started fleeing, the police did not have need to direct their shot at the escaping crowd. It was one such shot that killed the late Sabrina Mukaila. Secondly, there was rioting at the collection center and damage was caused to property and electoral material. The recommendation of the task force is that the family of the deceased person be compensated by the state. The suspects arrested are currently being prosecuted at the High Court in Kumasi. The report has been forwarded to the Attorney General for the compensation to the deceased family. Nkranza South constituency in Nkranza, the observation of the task force is that there were 16 soldiers involved, and when they were screened, 5 have been identified as being in the group who were present during the incident. One soldier, Lance Corporal Dakwa Dwamina Ochre, who was identified as having shot the late Abdul Karim Rafiq alias Tyson, admitted shooting him but justified his action by saying that he saw the deceased trying to disarm his colleague, that's Private Boahim Francis, and that the deceased had drawn a cutlass to slash his colleague. Private Boahim Francis, who could not collect this evidence in full since he was trying to pick up the magazine of his M16 rifle, which had fallen during the struggle when he heard the shot. The evidence collected so far does not show that the deceased committed any breach of the law. The military personnel who were deployed to the collation center had a duty to prevent any interference with the electoral process, and they were also required to maintain and restore peace whenever disorder threatened. The recommendation of the task force is that the family of the Abdul Karim Rafiq, because it involves this soldier, that is well established that he really fired the shot. So that has been forwarded to Attorney General for advice. Offensive of constituency, that's Akumadan. The task force realized that the incident led to the loss of 2 persons and injured 2 others. The observation of the task force is that the late Jacob Nalo with stray bullets. The task force, through discreet investigation, identified 12 suspects as those who attacked and subsequently lynched deceased Jacob Nalo. 5 of the 12 have been arrested and before the Kumasi High Court for Kumasi and are currently in prison custody, yet to meet their bail condition. The others are on the run, and the police is making every effort to get them arrested to face justice. Ahafano Southwest, that's most brought the collation process to a halt. The shot at the crowd cannot be an acceptable crowd control method, since it endangers the life of fleeing youth and bystanders, including the late Dominic Nimo, who were now being involved in creating the chaos, claim to be some by the bullet. In a screening exercise, 11 soldiers were identified as those detailed at the constituency center in Mankranso on the December 7, 2024. 8 of the soldiers interviewed admitted firing warning shots alongside the police to disperse the mob, which was attacking the collation center. They denied firing into the crowd and further said that they were not aware that anybody was hit by a bullet during the process. There was no doubt that the late Dominic Nimo died from a shot fired by the soldiers. Similarly, the 4 victims also got their injuries through the same process. The recommendation of the Special Task Force is that the family of the late Dominic, as well as the 4 persons who sustained the gunshot injuries, should be compensated by the state. The report has since been forwarded to the Attorney General for advice and the compensations to the families of the deceased and the injured persons. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is worth noting that the report has been sent to the Office of the Attorney General for further actions and prosecutions. As Minister for Interior, I want to assure the public that government under the able leadership of His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama is committed to upholding the rule of law and to ensuring that all those decisions and ensure that elections in the country are peaceful. God bless our homeland Ghana and make it great and strong. I want to thank you once again, especially the Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much. The outcome of investigation so far. I know that there are many of you who have many questions agitating your mind. So we'll open the floor for you to ask any questions that only able to take 5 questions. So if you have a question, please put up your hand, walk up to the front here, identify yourself and go straight to your question. So the minister will conduct the question and answer session himself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kevin Massimo, the country to the president, and in your report from the task force, we've seen that reports, some identified that there were stray bullets there, and then we've seen the results of the stray bullets. Are there also going to be some catered that we are going to provide justice? We should be able to provide justice whether it came from the civilians or it came from the security personnel. Are there going to be forensic analysis to determine some of the bullets, where it came from and who it killed, so that we can bring justice to the matter? Thank you very much.
I wanted to find out what message.
Please, good afternoon, everyone, and then good afternoon, Minister. The previous government gone by election, so I'd like to ask if you can actually assure Ghanaians what if the government is willing to put steps together to make sure that these, if claims are being made, they are not actually rejected. And then I'd like to ask what steps the ministry is taking to make sure that incidents like this do not happen further in the future.
Well, let me. Okay.
Yeah, just to top up on what you just said about I also West Forgotten. You did indicate that the report is going to be fully implemented. You did not give the details of what is entails in the report. So I want to find out what really is in the report. Yeah.
Well, let me thank you so much. I thought that in the case of the IROS Wars program, the report was published. So it's public, what do you call it, knowledge. And I with all humility and respect, I'm sure that if you Google, you'll see them. But most importantly, to link it up to what the earlier questioner asked, if you read the recommendation of the MSHOT, specifically, I think paragraph 3.5 and 5.5, there he even stated that further investigations could be carried on. That further investigations could be carried on. So they didn't make it very conclusive. But some individuals for prosecutions need to be done. They mentioned some individuals for some actions to be taken. We need to ensure that those things are done. In fact, we need to further exploit the 3.5, like I said, paragraph 3.5 and 5.5, where the commission will not be able to bring this unfortunate incident to a stop. And to add it up to what we are doing to prevent these things from happening. You see that both in the short commission's report and even the task force report, because I mean, interestingly, it's very voluminous, but I'm happy that I was able to get time to read from the first page to the last page. Even though they have not finished, they have made a lot of recommendations. For example, why should security people who are going for election monitoring be in hooded masks? What are you hiding? Why should you mask your face? I mean, they made recommendation about coordination So, for example, if we decide to bring immigration officers, fire service officers, the military and the police to embark on mission among themselves, don't give gadgets to only the superior officers. Make sure that all those who are on the election activity are holding the gadgets so they can communicate. It's, like I said, the process is not comprehensive and is not completed. And we are already looking at it, and I can assure you, you can see that we fully implemented some of the recommendations that the Special Task Force has made. So I can assure you, as the Minister for Interior, under the leadership of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, we are not going to make this a kind of one-off thing, the usual thing. No, we can assure you that you can see from the work that they are doing. We are empowering them, we are giving them the resources, and I can bet you, the team, I can see some of the members of the team even took the pain to meet them, to encourage them, to let them know they have my full backing and the backing of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama to carry out this function without fear or favor. And to have imagined that even the army had to cooperate with them, because in all, 50 men from the military were interrogated by the task force. It tells you the first question that we were asking, whether we're going to do forensic. In fact, we're not doing only forensic. They tell that we're even doing ballistic analysis. But one of the challenges that we are having is that if you take the gun that fired a shot in 2020, and between the 2020 and now, it has fired so many others, it makes it very difficult to do the tracing and mapping. But I'm sure, together with the Special Task Force, with our CID, PID, and even the military, what we call intelligence, we work so hard. And I don't want to preempt the conclusion of this, because in some of the cases that we are not able to bring finality, we need to be sure that is it the best that we can do. If there's something other than what the CID is doing that we have to do, I want to assure you that under the leadership of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, that will be done, because it's not just about identifying people and compensating them, but making sure that the perpetrators are brought to book. And that will be really, really our effort. So, yes, I can assure you that we will leave no stone unturned. We'll make sure that we put in measures that will prevent these things from happening. But I want to say that as citizens, we ourselves need to also be helpful. Because you see, when we refuse to give the information, like we are having in Banda Ahinkro and Banda Bonkasi, because there is rivalry between the two towns, meanwhile somebody has lost his life. We need information. I mean, people cannot just come because they are CID, they can conjure facts or information. They need people to give the information that can lead them into finding the truth. So we want to encourage our communities to also be
All right, so we take it that the minister's briefing has gone down well. Yes. Thank you very much.
So I want to thank all of you for your time. May God continue to bless all of us and continue to make our country great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for that briefing. As the Minister indicated, there is an ongoing process. So the details that he's provided here relate to what's in his mind, that finality must be brought to this matter, must receive some form of restitution. So on that note, I thank all of you for coming. See you another time.